are not very hopeful about the outcomes of the Global Stocktake. But what our speakers have to tell us this morning, probably there are so many people who have joined, did not even know what the Global Stocktake is all about. So today, we are having our speakers here to give us insights about this process and why it has become such a topical issue parties and for delegates at COP28. So yes, my name is Patience Adikum. I am the head of climate change programs at the Strategic Network for Development, and we are organizing the Roots COP28 webinar series every month from now to November, where we bring you seasoned speakers to teach us or talk to us about the various things that are going to be discussed at COP28. So that as young people will also be very well informed about the process and also have a platform to share and contribute to the discussion as well. I'm excited because this is the 3rd year we started from the Roots COP28 webinar series. We did Roots COP27, and today we are giving the first edition of the Roots COP28 webinar series. And we are happy that all throughout the 3 years, a lot of young people have been able to join and been educated about the COP processes. And we know that this year's edition is not going to be any different. So like I said earlier, share the link on your WhatsApp platforms, tag us on social media, let other people know that this conversation is happening so that they can also join and benefit from it. So I'm now going to introduce my speakers for them to give us their brief remarks. Then we dive deep into the discussion. So my first speaker for today, I'll introduce all of them and take the remarks from them then and go into the discussion. My first speaker is Ms. Esther Nyamekye. She's a trained climate negotiator for Ghana and the African Group of Negotiators. Esther plays a pivotal role in negotiating crucial topics such as the Global Stocktake, transparency and mitigation, advocacy for effective climate change policies and action, and dedication to youth engagement and empowerment in climate action is evident through her involvement with the United International Federation of Youth for Water and Climate, where she serves as a focal point for Ghana. Amazing. Hi, Esther, can you hear me?
Hello, Pat, I can hear you. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. You have some few remarks for us. What should we expect from you today, this morning?
All right, thank you. With expectation for this morning, we have seasoned people on the panelists, and you should expect more in as much as we have Evelyn, we have Mr. Yaw as a lead negotiator on Global Stocktake. I would like to tell all youth here that please listen, try to note down all salient points that will be shared and move along. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. We are definitely going to listen and note all our points so that we can bombard you with the questions. Our second speaker is Ms. Evelyn Addor. She's a development communication professional and a climate justice activist from Ghana. She's a trained climate reality leader and a member of the African Women's Development and Communication Network, Feminines, Forest Watch Ghana, and Youth-NREG Environmental Management. She currently works at EcoCare, where she's a communications officer and the local person for Climate Generations projects. She's also a climate negotiator on loss and damage and action for climate empowerment for Ghana. Good morning, Evelyn. It's so good to have you here.
Okay, so I'm very excited to be here. Happy to see all the panelists, Mr. Yaw, Esther, and to see all the wonderful Youth-NREG platform members and other people joining. I'm happy to be part of this conversation. I'm here to also learn as much as possible because the Global Stocktake is not really my area of negotiation, but I've been following it nonetheless. So I'm here to learn, I'm here to share, and hopefully we can have a good time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. Yes, definitely we are all going to let's hear that. Now it's my honor to introduce a senior lawyer and the country's lead negotiator on Global Stocktake. Lawyer Yaw Osafo is a barrister based in Ghana. His practice includes advisory services on climate law and policy, advising government agencies, non-governmental organizations, and international institutions on climate measures and their domestic implementation, especially in the forestry sector. He has considerable experience at the UNFCCC Climate 12-7 on Ghana's negotiation team and also a lead negotiator for the African Group of Negotiators. He's a current lead negotiator for African Group of Negotiators on Global Stocktake at the UNFCCC negotiation. A very good morning to you, Yaw Osafo, and we are so excited and grateful that you could join us this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Patience, and I hope everyone can hear me clearly.
Yes, yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Good. A few people I know, Evelyn and what's her name, Esther. So good morning to all of them, and I'm sure we will all meet in person soon enough.
Yes, most definitely. And like I mentioned, we are very happy that you were able to join us this morning. So now we are going to dive in deep to the discussion. But once again, you're all welcome. This is the first edition of the Road to COP28 webinar series organized by the Strategic Youth-NREG for Development, together with our partners, P15 Africa Climate Reality, British High Commission, and some other partners who have supported us every year before we go to COP. We provide a platform for young people to learn about the COP processes and also share what they are doing in their own small way to contribute to climate action. Okay, so Esther, as a youth negotiator, probably there are so many people who have joined that do not have any knowledge about what Global Stocktake is. Can you give us a brief overview and why it has become such a topical issue at COP28?
Okay, thank you very much. So as a young negotiator, the first Global Stocktake is expected to run from 2021 to 2023. And we're in 2023 now. And the GST facilitates the assessment of global collective progress on 3 thematic areas. So these are mitigation, adaptation, means of implementation, and support. So yeah, these 3 thematic areas are discussed during GST sessions. The GST also concerns or considers the social and economic consequences of response measures as well, and efforts to address loss and damage. So yeah, you find GST actually talking about almost all thematic areas at the COP processes. And with this, the collective assessment takes input on equity and into consideration. We also have best available science in all cross-cutting manners. The outcomes of GST usually inform countries on updating and enhancing, their nationally determined manner or NDCs, the nationally determined contributions from each country. With this, their climate actions and supports are well enhanced to match up with international cooperation for climate action. So GST is actually intended to increase the ambition of actions and support for collectively addressing climate change without focusing on just individual countries or group of countries, but to cut across. So GST outputs will also...
Interesting. Esther, thank you very much. So collectively, looking at how when it comes to the implementation of our nationally determined contribution. I'll come back to you for more, but Yaw Osafo has to, leave very soon. So I'll go to him and then I'll come back to you again for further discussions.
All right, thank you.
So thank you once again, and then thank you for joining us, Yaw Osafo. Kindly update us on the GST process. Esther has given us some background information of what it's about. So what is the progress after the SB meetings, and should we expect a positive outcome from the process?
Yeah, and thank Esther for the introductory remarks. Just to add, to help set the scene before I talk about what happens after the SBs in Bonn. Look, in the past, the climate change regime has been running since the early 1990s, and each time we've always known that what science requires us to do in order to avert dangerous human interference with the climate is going to require very painful economic actions. All our economies everywhere are built on energy, is basically what propels economic activity and commerce and so forth. And most of it is through the exploitation and the use of fossil fuels. So if you're going to reduce emissions in most economic activities, whether even if it's agriculture and you're not using, the conventional energy, it still leads to emissions. So it requires not just a shift in the type of energy sources we use, but even also changing the way we undertake economic activity. And that's a very difficult process. And most countries have so far been unwilling to do the sort of thing that is required to be able to help us reduce emissions. So we've always known that we will always be lagging behind what science requires us to do, which is why the idea of the global stocktake came. It was the same thing in Kyoto in 97, where I think they were supposed to reduce the emissions a certain percentage. I've forgotten, was it 5% below 1990 levels or much more than that? What the developed countries put forward, or we agreed to at the multilateral level, was nowhere near that amount. And it's the same thing. We all understood going into Paris that it's going to be difficult to be able to achieve what science wants us to achieve. So we need a periodic period where we can do an assessment of where we've reached in relation to where we want to be, and then determine what more we need to do in order to get on the right path. And then we all go, and that's what Esther was referring to when she says, then the outcome of the global stocktake we will all take those outcomes into account, and then we'll say, well, we're going to do X amount more than we had originally planned because science says we're falling really behind. And it will happen every 5 years. So this is the first one. So it's a really important period since Paris. It's probably the most important period since Paris, because in a way, we are using best available science has told us that we need to peak global emissions by 2025, absolutely, and then decline between now and 2030. We need to, I think, reduce 40% below 2010 levels or something like that. But if we don't achieve those targets, it will be difficult for us to achieve 1.5 degrees centigrade. And frankly, when the IPCC sixth assessment report is talking about overshoot, then you know that the likelihood of us overshooting the 1.5 degrees centigrade is extremely likely. So this is what the global stocktake has been doing. We're reviewing what we've achieved, how much more we need to achieve in order to be where science wants us to achieve. We undertook that through a 3-phase process, which started in 2021. The first was the information gathering and compilation phase. That's when the signal went out that we're about to start the global stocktake. Anybody who's got any information that they want the stocktake should consider should start compiling and gathering it and then submit it. And they did. And I think till by Bonn in June, I think there had been, I've forgotten how many submissions, but over 170,000 pages worth of documents were submitted for consideration. And then in phase 2, you had the technical phase where there will be a series of dialogues, 3, they call them technical dialogues. And this is where we will go into each of the thematic areas and assess where we've reached, what more we need to do, and where we want to be. And the last one was in Bonn last month. At the end of that, there's always a summary report that comes out written by the co-facilitators, and then they will write a summary report for the entire technical dialogue. It's called a factual synthesis report, and that will come out in no later than the 15th of, no, I think by the end, no later than the 15th, no, by the 8th of September. That factual synthesis report will contain the key findings from the technical dialogue that we had. It's probably going to say we are way behind where we want to be, and we need to scale up by 2030. It will say that there's enough financing or capital in the world, in the markets, to be able to finance the achievement of the Paris Agreement goals, but they need to be reoriented to achieve that. And it will also talk about adaptation and then loss and damage, and how we're all making progress, but the progress is insufficient. So between now and then the other thing we decided to do, the third phase is the political phase, and that's the phase we're currently in. And that's where the negotiations for the final outcome of the Global Stocktake will be. We're about to do submissions, and we need to make those submissions by the 15th of September. And that would contain the list of, will contain the elements that we think should be in the final outcome of the Global Stocktake. We already came out from Bonn last month with a draft outline of what the decision should look like. And then we will provide more flesh to the skeleton over the summer. Once the factual synthesis report comes out, we will finalize it, we will submit it. And then at the beginning of November, there'll be a workshop in Dubai to basically to look at those elements that all countries and parties are putting forward. And then we get to the negotiations in Dubai at COP28, where it will start with a 2-day summit. And then we will go, the ministers will also meet, that's the high level, and then the technical negotiations will take place. But before that, in New York, there will also be a series of meetings, both a summit, the Secretary General is organizing a climate action summits where all the heads of states will be, businesses, people will be asked to make commitments including on transparency and accountability, and also what they're about to achieve, what they would like to achieve in order to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. And then there will also be a high-level ministerial meeting specifically on the Global Stocktake in New York, and that will be chaired by the UAE, the COP28 presidency. There's also the African Climate Action Summit, which President Ruto of Kenya is holding at the beginning of September, and that's coinciding also with the African Climate Weeks. And again, discussions will be, they are related to the Global Stocktake. I think he's focused on trying to see how he can get investments to support Africa's transition to a low emissions, climate resilient future. So roughly speaking, that's the sort of roadmap that we have waiting for us. But there will be a final outcome in Dubai, mostly because we can't afford not to have a final outcome. And it will address all the thematic areas. Looking at some of the things that have been said in the negotiations, I expect there will be a section on guidance. Some parties, particularly the small island states, are not prepared to leave without some directions to countries about what they should do. Typically, we have the decision which includes details of what we should do, and then every country is left to go back and see how they apply it. But they want something much more stronger than that, mostly because this is a really critical decade, and I think there are likely to be sections on accountability to make sure that parties are doing what they are accounting for the implementation of the outcomes of the Global Stocktake. Once we finish this and we come out with the decisions, probably likely to include a political declaration. Then in 2025, between then and 2025, all countries will see how they can enhance the ambition of their actions and support. And then the Secretary General will host a meeting or a summit or an event where all the heads of states will come and present their updated NDCs. So that's the roadmap that we have remaining for the first Global Stocktake.
That's very interesting, and thank you for the detailed submission of the process so far. And from what you mentioned, I mentioned earlier in my submission that some people are very hopeful and they are expecting that since we are taking stock of how far we've come with the implementation of our NDCs, this will be able to, inspire actually from the countries to be able to come up with more ambitious plans when they are reviewing the NDCs. Others think otherwise. They think, all the IPCC reports haven't been able to inspire them on action. What is the Global Stocktake going to do? So we want to find out from you, from where you sit, being involved in this process. Should we expect a positive outcome that after the conclusions from the Global Stocktake come out, parties are really going to strengthen implementations of their climate ambition plans in their agencies?
Well, I think a positive outcome depends on what your priorities are, and countries have different priorities. The global north, or the developed countries, for them it's mitigation. They want everyone to be able to try and meet the mitigation targets that we ought to meet in order to keep 1.5 degrees centigrade within reach. And it's not to say the rest of us don't have the same ambition. We all want to be able to achieve 1.5. Africa in particular, if we exceed 1.5, the impacts on the various sectors of our economy and our continent is going to be incredibly devastating. And this is why science is always saying we're the most vulnerable, largely because of the impacts in our level of development. Small islands, again, for them, mitigation, achieving 1.5 and also loss and damage is a really important factor for that. So they'll be looking at the contents of the decision on those two particular issues. For Africa, as I've mentioned, it's mitigation is important, 1.5, but adaptation. Our emissions footprint is less than 3%. There really isn't much opportunities for reducing our emissions, but our economies are growing, but there's also a significant potential in both the energy and the AFOLU sectors. The AFOLU sectors are the land sectors. These are adaptation issues, but they also require means of implementation, which is largely finance. So we'll be looking to those areas of the negotiations to see if we can achieve the things that we need in order to support our transition to a low emissions pathway. And let me say, look, for us, and I think for many of the G77 countries, the guiding principle is equity or fairness. And Esther mentioned that when she was giving her introductory remarks. Fairness, largely because 90% of the problem has been created by developed countries. And it's important, we've all agreed in the convention that they will take the lead. The situation we have now is that lead that they're taking is not commensurate with what we believe in science would suggest that they need to achieve. Their reductions are not deep enough. They are, and then the provision of finance in order to help us also to transition is not significant enough. So the effect of that is that it puts the burden for achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement on us, and that's not fair. We want the outcome for the Global Stocktake to address this particular issue. So, like I said, it depends. So every regional group or set of countries have their own developmental priorities, and so for us, we would want to see enhanced means of implementation. More importantly, we want to see what Esther referred to as response measures addressed. Response measures are actions countries are taking to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. Sometimes it will have a negative impact on you. And currently it's beginning to have significant economic impacts on Africa, on their trade balance, on their debt crisis, and government revenue. These are some of the, I can go into more details, but they will take a little bit more time than we have. So we're all looking at those various components of the decision which speak to our development, our own national and regional circumstances, to ensure that it addresses the concerns we have. And that's what we will consider a positive outcome.
Thank you very much. Like you mentioned, we have different national circumstances, and different countries or different parties have different priorities. Someone said some time ago that this is a unique opportunity for Africans to make sure that the global north will take up the task, and so that we do not bear the burden of transition. You also think this is a very unique opportunity for Africans to be able to get some of our key priorities addressed, and how are Africans, because we need on GST at the African negotiators, how are we consistently pushing to ensure that the global take responsibility for reducing their emissions, so we don't continue to suffer the most from the impacts of the crisis?
Well, let me give two brief points to explain. The first is the Paris Agreement did a really good job in sending a signal to everyone, both the private sector, academia, research, governments, non-government stakeholders, that 194 countries are determined that they are going to move away from emission-intensive economic model to one that's a low carbon or net zero pathway. What it didn't do was to say that that transition was going to be fair and equitable. And when we talk about fairness or equitable, some countries will say it's gender, the next generation, or all sorts of different, understanding. For us, it's different. It's the current. We want to be able to achieve the SDGs, which we've all agreed are the basic levels of development that every human is entitled to. The way response to climate change is taking place now are impacting our ability to be able to achieve the SDGs. So, and we have the Ghana example. We use, I think, our revenue from the exploitation of oil and gas to finance free SHS. Education is one of the SDGs. If the World Bank and IFC and the others and the other multilateral banks are saying we're no longer going to finance development of new fossil fuel deposit discoveries because science says some has to stay on the ground, then you're essentially cutting the legs from underneath us to be able to achieve those SDGs. And mind you, they're not providing sufficient financing to plug the gap that's created by it. Our contributions to global emissions were 0.1%. So you have to assess the fairness of that. Is it fair for countries like Ghana, from Senegal, from Mozambique, from Namibia, and the others who've discovered significant fossil fuels to leave theirs on the ground, whilst other countries, particularly in the north, who've been exploiting for decades, continue to exploit to finance a very good lifestyle, whereas we're trying to finance a very basic level of development that or amenities that we need in order to live a life of dignity. So these are the sort of questions we have to frame our own narrative and go into the negotiations and communicate this and then engage in a discussion with the North and other countries in the developing world. So this is what we've been trying to do. And the hook for us has been references to equity, the right to sustainable development, and poverty alleviation. And these you'll find this in the convention. You also find this in Article 2 of the Paris Agreement. In fact, I think Article 2.1 states that the global response to climate change will be in the context of sustainable development and poverty alleviation. So if we are, basically what this means is that if you want to assess the fairness of African countries or Ghana's actions to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, you must understand that it will be consistent with our developmental priorities of achieving the SDGs and alleviating poverty reduction. So this has been our strategy during the negotiations. We go in there, we set out our national and our regional circumstances in relation to the goals of the Paris Agreement, and we're working to help them understand how to understand the fairness of our actions, and then also engage them on theirs. There's very limited amount of carbon space left. Let's say that about 14% of the remaining carbon space left. We have to have a discussion about who's going to use the vast majority of the remainder, and fairness has to play a role, both historical responsibility and current contributions to global emissions. We have to look at the level of development and vulnerability. We look at the debt situation and a few other factors. So fairness is probably an issue is going to become extremely important in the discussions that we will have in Dubai.
Thank you very much. I mean, we can go on and on about the debate about equity and fairness and whether what the global market is doing. It's viewpoints in us at the Global South. But I know you also have to run because you have other engagements. But before I go to my last question, please, if you are on and you have any question for Lawyer Osafo, kindly raise your hand. We're going to give you the opportunity. Just 1 or 2 questions because he has to go, and then we continue with the rest of the discussion. So, does anyone have a burning question for him? If not, we'll continue with the, anyone?
No.
Okay. All right. So, Lawyer, before you go, so what does this, you mentioned about this whole process, what does this mean to us in country? So, Ghana, how is the outcomes of the Global Stocktake going to, inspire how we're going to the review of our national determined contributions in country? What would we expect?
Well, we're legally required to take the outcomes of the Global Stocktake back to our capitals and then update and enhance our actions. So it's likely that the NDCs that we pledged, we'd updated in 2021. We will probably, like all other countries, have to increase our ambition there. I think the issues that are really important are, and the president touched on this in Glasgow in 2021, where he spoke on this whole issue of, I think it was on the exploitation of our natural resources, our debt situation, and making suggestions about how those could be addressed. I think he offered the example of a debt for nature swap. That is to say, we've got this amount of debt, give us debt forgiveness, and then we will try and see, it could be that we can try and see if we can reduce our emissions by a certain percentage or something like that. The outcome for the Global Stocktake will not go into that detail. It might probably say we all need to reduce our emissions by 30% by 2028 or 2030. Everybody should go out and see what they can contribute. Then there will be bilateral and other sort of negotiations that are likely to take place next year and through to 2025, where some of us, countries like ours, will sit our bilateral partners and say, look, we want to make these contributions, but these are, if you give us this amount or we have access to that, it will provide, it will have a very impactful implication on our ability to both meet our development objectives and reduce our emissions. So those negotiations will probably take place the following year. And I think right now where we are, we've got about 5, let's say, if we're using oil and gas as an example and how much that's assisting us to achieve our SDGs, there are 5 blocks offshore where we are still looking for investments. If the Global Stocktake, the outcome, for instance, say, we're going to phase out unabated fossil fuels, but then that statement says, but that will start in developed countries who've achieved X amount, then that creates some sort of space or room for countries like ours who need additional investments to be able to bring some of these, the oil and gas out and then support and use that to finance our SDGs. It could mean that they might say that, look, if that's the case, we still think the oil and gas should remain on the ground, but we're prepared to finance enhanced energy access in Ghana, whether by providing X amount to support fossil renewable energy, solar and wind. And that's also another conversation that could be had. So the outcome from the Global Stocktake will set the scene and the tone, and I guess the parameters for what countries like ourselves are required to put forward. And then the rest of it is just going to be through bilateral and other forms of multilateral negotiations to see what sort of international cooperation or assistance could be shared in order to help each country achieve their goals. So yes, we will have to update our NDCs, but we will do so in a fair manner, and there will be conversations subsequently on what that should look like.
Wow, that's very interesting. There are so many things to take away from your submissions this morning. But before we go, we have one participant who has raised his hand, and then we'll take this question briefly. Then you can say bye-bye to you, and then look forward to having you join us once again and to share your insightful remarks with us. So, Alvin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Very
yes.
clearly.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. In your submission, you made mention of the fact that countries go into the negotiations with a motive. I'd like to know, first of all, what Ghana's motive is in the approaching COP28. And secondly, when are young people actually invited to the roundtable to share their ideas, their suggestions, or what our motive should be?
All right, and Alvin, those are really good questions, and it's good you asked them. Better late than never. Start with your second question. When are young people invited? The Global Stocktake has actually been slightly different has been run in a slightly different manner to how we normally do negotiations. Normally in the negotiations, it's just parties, countries who negotiate, because these are commitments and legal obligations that countries will take on board. When you sign up as a party to a legal agreement, when a decision is taken, you're all obliged to implement it. But in this instance, the Global Stocktake was opened up so that not just government representatives, but also non-state actors, including civil society, the youth, gender, indigenous peoples, academia, private sector, were all invited, and they did participate in the negotiations. The challenge that we had was that there were a lot more non-government officials, shall I put it that way, from the northern or the developed countries than the south, and that's largely because of funding. So we've been trying to push to ensure that there's balance and that there's good representation from the south. This obviously can be improved, and hopefully subsequent for us in Global Stocktakes, you will see more enhanced participation by young people from the global south. So that's the first thing. Going to negotiations, what are our priorities? And Ghana, so Ghana, we're part of the African group, and this is one of the few international negotiations where Africa comes up with a common position. We don't negotiate as individual countries. We all meet, we coordinate, we come up with a position that reflects all the African countries' national development priorities and circumstances. And then when we go into the negotiations, we have one lead negotiator, and then he spearheads the negotiations for us, and of course all the other countries in the group, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and the others, Egypt, will join and support. So our priorities are reflected in the African priority. And the African priority, as I said, the guiding principle for us is fairness. We contributed very little to creating the problem. We continue to contribute a lot less than any other. Our contribution is, again, very insignificant when it comes to the current emissions of greenhouse gases. Our priority is adaptation, because we're feeling the impacts. And then increasingly, we're also finding that our ability to achieve our SDGs and make that transition to a low emissions, climate resilient pathway is being undermined by what we call response measures, so actions that other countries are taking, which are reducing our revenues from the exploitation of our natural resources and our endowments. So going into it, we want that policy space to be preserved. And that's where I use the example of, for instance, reducing the production of oil and gas in developed countries so that investment can flow to other countries in the south, including ourselves, who haven't created much of the problem, to be able to use that revenue to achieve our SDGs. Or if we're going to triple renewable energy generating capacity by 2030, as the UAE is attempting to have us agree to by at COP28, then a significant chunk of the resources or the investments that will generate, that will achieve that, should be channeled in the south to the countries who have significant renewable energy potential, who are least responsible for the problem, and where the impact of that investment will have a significant contribution to the welfare of many people, as opposed to the North, where it's just sort of padding a very luxurious lifestyle relatively by countries who've taken up most of the carbon space. So I hope that's clear enough.
Yeah.
At this point, I think Alvin, hold on for us. Unfortunately, lawyer has to go because he has another equally important engagement. So don't worry, we'll take your questions.
Patience.
Send it to you by email. Okay.
If you've got a comment, I'm happy to hear it.
Okay, Alvin, you can go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. I did like to know what progress or initiative your outfit is putting in place in training more climate negotiators, because I attended a PhD candidates screening the other day, and arguments were raised that the negotiators we sent last year were amateurs, and these are not my words. And I actually couldn't say anything in rebuttal because I didn't even know how well equipped these negotiators were.
Well, I mean, I was there. I met some of the young negotiators who the EPA had put on the delegation, and I think there were several. And look, they did a fantastic job. Esther was my aide de camp, so to speak. So she was staying up midnight during the negotiations when other people will go to bed. Evelyn was also in Bonn in June, and then there were a few others I remember from countries. These are extremely difficult negotiations, even for professionals, and you have the world's leading experts on many of the government delegations, because this is a crucial matter for many governments. The economic aspects are really important. You have to have your best foot forward. And remember, these negotiations have been going on for more than 2 decades. So there's terminology, there are decisions from every year that you have to familiarize yourself with in order to really understand an issue. And even for grown-ups like ourselves, it's not easy. It requires a lot of work. And I think the junior negotiators we brought did a very good job in supporting the senior members of the delegation to do that. So I don't know who made that comment. I suspect they probably weren't at the COP. If they did, they wouldn't have made that comment. So
yes, yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. There's one more question for you in the chat also. I think we got the responses probably from your initial submission, but if you can, I can read us as well so you can address before we go. Can I go ahead? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Patience with us.
Okay. So this is from Richard Mate. Okay, Isaac Damso says, thank you for your response. And Richard Mate's question is if there's a call to leave fossil fuels in the ground, which will affect our industrialization and at the same time have a huge RE potential untapped, how can we as Africa use the RE potential narrative to negotiate for technology, capacity, and finance to enable us to attain energy security and ensure energy access as we work to industrialize? So how can we use the abundance of the renewable energy resources that we have on tap to be able to negotiate for technology, capacity, and finance to enable us to attain energy security and energy access as we work to industrialize? So probably developing sustainably.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. And let me add as a follow-up to my last response that the EPA normally does quite a good job in trying to train young negotiators and bring, and even the African group has started the process of trying to recruit more junior negotiators and training them. So I imagine that the opportunities will increase as we go along. To Richard Martis' question. Look, I mean, this is precisely the conversation that we are aiming to have with in the global stocktake and with the developed countries. The Africa, they say we have 60% of the best potential for solar on the continent. Kenya has significant geothermal energy opportunities. I think they've got up to about 10 gigawatts. And they're currently only using 1 gigawatts. Wind too, there's quite a lot. I know in Ghana, I think the ECOWAS document said we have about 6,800 megawatts of wind potential. I say like 25 or 30% or so. So we all have significant potential. And that's the conversation we have to have with them. The challenge is that the North hasn't been very, they haven't kept their end of the bargain when it comes to the provision of these resources. And look, nobody's going to give you the solar panels or the wind turbines for free. They are produced on a commercial basis, they sell. So how do we finance those? We all thought the $100 billion that they agreed to in Copenhagen and later in Cancun was going to materialize. We're now in 2023, and I think they've achieved just under 80% of those, and those also through questionable labeling of finance and relabeling of finance that they were providing for other things. So the trust is no longer there. So this is why we're going back to our exploitation of our natural resources is how we finance development. If we're not going to get the financing or the support to transition from fossil fuels to tap our huge renewable energy potential, then we have to exploit our natural resources to be able to achieve that. And look, significant amounts of deposits are being discovered. Senegal, I think now they have more deposits, if I understand it correctly, than even Qatar when it comes to natural gas. Namibia has also discovered significant amounts, and the Germans are going there to see how they can exploit it so that Namibian gas replaces Russian gas. Mozambique, we've all heard about the huge reserves that they've discovered. I gather Somalia also has some. A few other countries are also making more discoveries, and I think Ghana also has quite a few that's not been. And look, some people might say, look, we're all moving away from fossil fuels. But the truth is, the next few decades, we're going to still be using fossil fuels, maybe not at the same intensity that we're currently doing. So our position has been, if that's going to be the case, then let the remaining demand be met by countries from the South using those natural resources. And then the revenue from that is what we use to finance our transition. They're difficult negotiations. I think it's going to be, I'm curious to see how things will turn out. I'm sure they understand the position that we're coming from, but I think politically it'll be a very difficult thing for them. So we're all not sure how it's going to be. But if you've been following negotiations, you know that at the last two COPs, there have been attempts to phase out fossil language, talking about the phasing out of fossil fuels, and that's been resisted in the past. And I think in UAE, this is going to be a really difficult issue that's going to catch the headlines. And so we will see how we will do it. But to summarize Richard's point, if we're not going to get the financing, we need to exploit our natural resources in order to achieve that. So let's have a conversation about how we can do this.
And this has been very insightful engagement with you this morning. And once again, thank you very much for spending time with us and even ceding the time, because you have a very important engagement. I mean, there are so many things to take out of you, but your initial submission that most of our economies are built around, exploration of natural resources, and so moving away from fossil fuels and other unclean forms of energy will be very difficult for countries to do. But for the people and for the planet, we have to find a way of developing, but yet sustainably, so that even once we develop, we do not lose our lives and our livelihood. So we want to thank you very much on behalf of the Strategic Youth Network for Development, which are the organizers of this meeting, and our partners. Thank you very much for spending time with us and educating us young people about the Global Stocktake and the COP process. Definitely, we are going to have you back because we are going to be having sessions every month from now till we go to COP in December. So thank you once again, and to the participants, we are still getting a lot of questions in the chat box, but I promise we are going to tag them and send it to
and they're all very
so that
interesting questions. I hope
yes. So we are going to send you the rest so that you can give us the response via email.
Sure.
And please use the chat box to introduce yourself, so your name, your organization, and where you're joining us from. Later on, we're going to have interaction amongst ourselves, where we'll give you the platform to also share with us and what you are doing in your own small way to contribute to climate action. It's been a great pleasure hosting you once again, Lawyer, and we're definitely going to see you again on the road to COP28 we're going to see us.
Thanks very much, Patience, and a good day to everyone. Cheers.
All right, but we are not done yet. We have two very smart and intelligent youth negotiators with us who are going to continue the conversations around negotiation and the Global Stocktake with us. So do not leave yet. Stay right here with us, and probably you may have other very interesting questions for them as well. So Esther, okay, so we want to hear from you how the process has been for you negotiating on the Global Stocktake together with Yaw Osafo to inspire other young people here who also have similar interests.
So with my experience on Global Stocktake negotiations, it has been from technical dialogues to technical dialogues. We had a lot of roundtable discussions last year at Egypt. And with these technical dialogues, they are geared towards feeding into the process that's coming up with what nations are coming up with when it comes to climate action and how far we have gone. And as much as Global Stocktake is geared towards measuring how far we have gone with trying to cut down emissions, and also with the Paris Agreement goal. GST for COP28 is actually geared towards being a turning point to limit warming. And as much as we have other tracks to go on to. So the critical year for climate action has to do with we making sure that with the outcomes of GST, which took place in the last 2 years, stakeholders get to see collectively jotted down or will I say penned down progress towards meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement and where we are and where we are not. It also looks at where the world stands now and climate action and the support we need, which boils down to finance more specifically, as well as identifying the gaps and working together to chart a better course forward to accelerating climate action globally, and which boils down to at community level or nationally. So the Global Stocktake is actually more of a process. So it will keep rolling out even after COP28. We'll have it going on in a circular manner, which will keep feeding into every nation's national determined contributions. At Bonn, where my colleague was, Evelyn, I was online more often. Delegates and observers, experts took part in Global Stocktake third technical dialogues. So for the first year, we had a first technical dialogue. Second year, which was 22 in Egypt, we had second technical dialogue. So for this particular year, we are going to have our final dialogues, which serves as the third technical dialogue, which is supposed to comprise of series of roundtables as well, and events which is spread out throughout 6 days, I think the first week of negotiations at Dubai. Participants will definitely be discussing how to accelerate collective progress on mitigation, including response measures, adaptation, including loss and damage, Evelyn's line of conversation, and means of implementation. That's climate finance, technology transfer, and capacity building.
Thank you very much, Esther. We're definitely going to come back to you for more information about the process. But Evelyn, let's come to you now. Why is it so important for young people to be engaged in these policy discussions at the global level?
Can you hear me, Pat? Thank you so much for...
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, thank you so much for the opportunity. Just to address one of the questions Alvin posted to Doc, lawyer, that last year Ghana took amateur negotiators to COP. Yes, it's true. Some of us as the youth negotiators that was mostly our first time. But before joining the negotiation team, we went through a 6-month intensive negotiation training where we had to spend sleepless nights learning about UNFCCC system, going through documents and choosing your track and really making sure that you understand everything that happens at COP before we went there. So even though it was our first time, we're not lost at all. We're able to contribute and support the lead negotiators. And when we came back, we're able to write reports to inform national policies. So I just wanted to address that. And I hope to see a lot more young people join us so that when we go to COP28, we are able to actually make an impact. Now to your question, why is it important for young people to be part of the process? As we all know, and I mean, it has been stated over and over again, young people are the most vulnerable when it comes to climate impact. We are faced with flooding, heat stress, water scarcity, leading to poverty, hunger, diseases, death. And Africa, for one, is one of the most vulnerable continents. And Africa has the youngest population in the world, with over 40% of the entire population on the continent being under 15 years. So if we are not able to achieve the 1.5 degrees target of the Paris Agreement, the IPCC project that over 1.4 million people in Africa by 2050 are likely to face impaired growth, which means that people have stunted growth, people will have limited physical and cognitive potential on this continent alone. And so as the people that are mostly affected, we cannot afford to just sit on the sideline whilst decisions are being made for us. And that's why it's important for us to all come together, discuss, come up with ideas, and make sure that our voices are heard at the national community and at the international level. And so young people being part of the COP process is really important. The COP process, as we all know, is the highest decision-making when it comes to climate change, climate action, and all the national policies that we are having, all the community work that we are doing comes from decisions that are made at COP. And so we need young people to be present and to be at the table to contribute to the process and also be able to influence their national decisions even before COP. And this is why some of us decided that we want to be part of the process and went through the training and the sleepless nights of reading long documents and trying to understand technical UN jargons and to be part of the process. So I really hope that a lot more young people will be interested and will be dedicated and committed to the process and will join us to actually make a change. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Definitely young people cannot continue to sit on the sidelines while decisions are being made, which are definitely going to affect us the most. But as a follow-up, beyond COP, how do we continue to ensure that young people sustain actions that they are taking, as a contribution to the fight against climate change? But Evelyn, before you go, if you have any question for Evelyn or Esther, kindly use the chat box, or you can also raise your hand. We'll give you the opportunity to go. Like I said, later on, we are going to give the opportunity for 2 or 5 people to share with us what they are also doing in their respective countries, because you can see there are not only Ghanaians on this call, there are other people who have joined from different African countries. So we'll give you the opportunity to share with us what you are also doing. You can go ahead.
All right, thank you. So how do we ensure that the conversation continues or young people continue to engage post-COP? One, I think initiatives like the one we are having now, that's why in the initiative Road to COP and post-COP discussions is really critical. We need to, as young people, come together and continue having conversations among ourselves to really understand what is happening at the global stage, at the local stage, to come up with our own decisions and to be able to influence national decisions and international decisions. So having continuous dialogue before COP, after COP, and always just dialoguing among ourselves, sharing and learning from each other is very critical. Education is very important. We post-COP or before COP, we need to educate ourselves. Let's read the IPCC report to understand what is happening, what is the science, what are other countries doing, what can we do? Let's educate ourselves to also continue and share whatever we know. And also we need to look for areas that interest us as young people. And I'll break this into about 3 areas. So we have those who are interested in advocacy, creating awareness about the issue, educating community members. So if you are interested there, please get all the knowledge that you can around the area and continue the good work you are doing. We also have people who are interested in influencing policy and being part of the policy discourse. So also we need to get more young people who are interested in policy. And policy is not just about negotiations, but we need young people who go into politics. At the end of the day, when the policy is made, it's about the politicians that take it out and implement it. And if we have politicians who are not interested in climate action, we will have all the beautiful policies as we have now in Ghana, but when it comes to the actual work, we will not get anything done. So we need young climate enthusiasts who are interested in going into politics, who are interested in taking careers in the different areas of climate change. We need young people to take advantage of the emerging opportunities that climate change is bringing. Yes, climate change is like a doom and we are all anticipating that it's going to affect us negatively, but we can also see that there is a whole new economy emerging because of climate change. Young people have the unique opportunity of engaging there, making sure that we take advantage of the green economy, the recycling business, all the blue economy businesses that are coming up, the need for technology, to make sure that we are coming up with the solutions and we are making some money out of all this crisis that is happening. So these are areas that I think as young people, we can continue engaging in before COP, pre-COP, whatever. But I hope that more young people will be interested in really following everything. And I saw a question in the chat box where someone was asking about where to get information. Just go to the UNFCCC platform. All the decisions around climate change, all the discussions is there. The WRI, World Resource Institute, have amazing documents, amazing policy initiatives there that you can read and abreast yourself. So there's so much information around it. Let's just take advantage of the internet and learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. There's actually one more question for you in the chat box. Smith also raised his hand, and I don't know if he still wants to ask this question, but I'll ask you respond to this and then we'll take the rest of the questions. And please, you can also use the chat box if you have any question for Evelyn or Esther. And also you can use it to introduce yourself as well. So there's a question from Isaac, and it says, Evelyn, in your own opinion, what should we expect in COP28 on the discussions related to loss and damage as the fund has been established?
Thank you so much. So
this
for loss
is
and
your field. We are going to
yes,
your field.
I'm glad to get a loss and damage question. So for loss and damage, there is a lot to expect from COP28. I was in Bonn, and one of the core areas of work in Bonn was to make sure that the Santiago network is fully operationalized. So we're supposed to select a secretariat, a host organization to where the secretariat for the Santiago network will work from. And we were able to go through a lot of discussion. There were 2 proposals and we vetted them, but we were not able at Bonn to choose the host for the secretariat. And so we have a draft decision on how we want the host organization to function and what we'll be expecting, but we're not able to agree on which organization is going to host the secretariat. So I'm hoping that when we go to Dubai, we are able to have an agreement so that finally the Santiago network can start its work and all of us will start benefiting from their technical capacity. And we are able to have a better understanding and better route of work for the loss and damage. And also there's a lot of discussion on the financial arrangement for loss and damage. So we are also looking forward to having some sort of agreement. Some countries have already started pledging how much they want to pay into the fund. So in Dubai, we are hoping that we will have a number, how many people have paid, how many countries have paid, what is the amount we have currently, and then how is it going to be utilized, which areas are priority. So I'm hoping that in Dubai, the discussions on finance will go around there and finally we would be able to get the Santiago network working. So yeah, that's it.
Yes, yes. So say we all can't wait for them to start operationalizing this Santiago network. Thank you very much, Evelyn. So as I mentioned earlier, we are going to give 3 to 5 people the opportunity to share with us what they're doing in their communities. Because not only do we learn about as part of this, we also want to give young people the platform, right, for them to showcase their innovation and their work to the global community, because there are so many people who have joined us for this meeting from across the world. So before we come back to Evelyn and Esther to get their closing remarks, as Smith, your hand was up. If you're ready, you can go, and then we're going to take 2 to 3 more submissions from other people, preferably from different countries. So you mentioned your name, your organization, the country you're joining us from, and then you tell us about your initiative.
All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. My name is Smith Mokocha. I'm joining from Nigeria. I'm the project lead for Voice of the Vulnerable. Okay, so I actually wanted to ask a question. The question would be that how do we demand commitment, or is it possible to demand commitment through signing of a charter in the issues around climate and finance, in this coming COP28? Because there's something I observed. This forthcoming COP28 will be organized in a country that is not so anyway friendly in the area of you see some organizations, they are even shy of coming down to Dubai. Some people are complaining about because of maybe religious differences or so. But we pray that it's going to be a success anyway. But I know that some organizations are having issues to join. And again, how is it that oil producing organizations, companies are the people in fact the people that are involved in emitting fossil fuel are the people championing COP28. How fruitful is the liberation going to be for the global south? I think that is a concern for us, and maybe I want to hear some of the thoughts around this. So anyway, I'm a climate justice actor, and I'm very passionate about issues around climate change. Thank you for giving me.
Thank you very much, Smith, for your question. Can you, tell us who you're addressing the question specifically to, so the person can respond to that? And then also, please, if you're here and you want to share with us your innovation you're doing in your community, in your country on climate action, raise your hand. We are going to give you the opportunity for you to share that action with us. And there are some very interesting points also in the chat box. There are so many questions in the chat box. I'm not sure we can have time to address all of that. There's a question from an anonymous attendee. I wish the anonymous can be made anonymous by introducing yourself. But he's asking, how can I, who is interested in negotiation, enroll to become a young negotiator? Okay, so the anonymous attendee wants to know how he can enroll to become a young negotiator. Esther or Evelyn, I think any one of you can respond to that. But before that, let me say hello to the people who have introduced themselves in the chat box. So this is Pati Seidu from Tambo Sun Foundation. Hello, Pati. Thank you for joining us. Isaac Kwabnada, so public servants. Okay, Isaac, continue serving. Sussex Sowa from Ghana Environmental Sustainability Enthusiast. Okay, hello, Success. This is Justina Amwa, a member of the Youth-NREG platform. And she says she's glad to be here and learning from young negotiators. Hello, Justina. There's also Smith, can you kindly hold it for us?
Okay.
Mute yourself. I'll get back to you. Thank you. And then there's Al Hassan Inusa. And forgive me, to Cherry from Tamale. Hello, Al Hassan. Thank you for joining us from Tamale. Betty has a question. I think it's related to the question I asked earlier. How can young people join the team to also become climate negotiators from Kumasi? And there's Al Hassan Balal from Tamale. Nagno. Oh, hello, Al Hassan. And there's Enchi Bedu he's a member of the Students in Natural Resources and Environmental Governance platform. Hello. And we have Lovans Muzitechi, the director of the Institute for Sustainable Energy and Environmental Solutions. Hello, Mr. Lovans. Evans Awuni from Ghana Innovation Foundation, joining live from Tsunami. Wow, that's interesting. It's good to see there are so many young people joining us from different parts of the country and also from different African countries. I'll ask Evelyn and Esther to take a bite at the question, how young people who are interested can also become negotiators. And then Smith, I beg your pardon, kindly use the chat box and type your question for us. I will make sure it's addressed before we leave here today. Okay, Esther, you can go first.
All right. So with regards to having interest and wanting to be a negotiator, a young negotiator, I'll advise that you can start in your own small way. All materials are available online on the UNFCCC website. You can always also reach out to any of us, myself, Evelyn, we have Esther Miracle on the call, and Mr. Isaac, the one who says he's a public servant. So we are all young negotiators on the call here today. You can reach out to us with any questions, and we can also direct you to the right quarters. So mostly with you joining negotiations, with the work you do, with the knowledge you have gained, and with training you undergo, then you can actually join negotiations. So it's a process. I'll encourage you to start somewhere by learning, and you join us soon. We'll be ready to have more young people around. And as much as we are the future, as we always say, we'll have to start now and get there. And with the other person's question, I think he was trying to know how we are going to make sure that we have action or commitment from parties. Yes, in as much as it seems like there are no commitments, but there is still little progress. So with the Dubai dynamics, as he was trying to say, I didn't get it so clear. But if you're talking about from the oil perspective, in which they find themselves more, their commitments from their presidency and other lay down structures. So it's about other parties getting to COP and also putting forth whatever we have. So let's see how it goes. It's an interesting thing to explore. So when we get there, we'll know how to tackle it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther.
Yes, just to add to what Esther said, to be a negotiator, you have to work with the government. So even though myself and Esther work with the CSO, the other young people on the team are from government. But as a negotiator, you are speaking on behalf of government. And so you need to get acknowledgement from the EPA, who is the, sorry, there's an ambulance person behind where I am. So you need to get to the EPA. If you are really interested, I suggest that you express your interest to the EPA and show them your commitment to climate policy. But to begin, you must be interested in national policy. Have you ever engaged in any national policy dialogues? Have you been able to contribute to national policy issues? If yes, then I think the EPA should have already known you somehow, and they can provide you with a platform or the opportunity for you to be trained as a negotiator. And then you can, because when you are a negotiator, you speak on behalf of the government. And so you need the government to really give you that acknowledgement, to give you that opportunity, to give you the power to speak on behalf of Ghana, or even to become part of the African group of negotiation. So you need to approach EPA and express interest to them. On the second question about Dubai, I think, yeah, it's a very dicey situation going to Dubai because, yeah, well, they are an oil country, but don't forget, Europe is also an oil-dependent continent, and they even have coal. The UNFCCC Secretariat is hosted in Germany, and Germany has been one of the most beneficiaries of coal. And so we cannot really say, because a country is an oil-producing country, we have to take them out of the dialogue. It is more important to bring people who we think are the cause of the problem to even be part of the conversation so that we can force them to commit to changing their ways. The whole world, no country has achieved net zero yet. And so we cannot say we are not going to go to Dubai because they have oil. And I think that Dubai government is also trying to make the process as easy as possible. In Bonn, they came to share how you can participate. So all you need is your accreditation from your government or whichever agency that you seek accreditation from. They have created a platform. Yeah, I think when you go to the COP28 website, where as soon as you have accreditation, you can just upload your accreditation to the platform and they will send you a visa. So you don't even need to go to Dubai embassy or anything to look for a visa for COP28. You just need your accreditation and then proof of accommodation and a few things, upload it to the platform and then they will send you a visa. So they are trying to make the process easy. Just go to their website, the COP28 website, go to the UNFCCC website and look for information on how you can participate. And if you have funding and support from your government, you can participate. Thank you. Okay, so I was just explaining that we cannot say, I don't know if you heard that part, but you cannot say because Dubai produces an oil, they don't deserve to host COP. All countries across the world are dependent on oil. None of us have fully transitioned yet. Even Germany that hosts the UNFCCC Secretariat is still using coal and oil in their production, in their economy. So we cannot judge Dubai that harshly. And I'm also saying that the Dubai government is trying to make this COP an easy one for everybody to participate. They have created a website, COP28 website, where you can just submit your accreditation and your proof of accommodation, and they will send you an e-visa. So getting visa to go for COP28 is so easy. So far as you have your accreditation from your government or whichever agency that is going to give you the accreditation, because I know some of the CSOs take the non-party accreditation badge. So once you get your accreditation and your proof of accommodation and some few documents, you are able to just upload it to the website, and then they will send you your visa by email. You don't need to go to their embassy or use a travel agent to travel to Dubai for COP28. So let's all see how it goes. I'm sure they are really committed. They did a number of presentations at Bonn to show how committed they are. And because this COP is really about GST, we are hoping that at the end of the day, we all have a good evaluation and assess what we've done so far to inform future COPs. So I'm sure Dubai will be fine. I'm sure they will try their best. And let's all try and participate and be respectful of their culture, because yes, it's an Islamic country. And when you are going into any country, you have to be respectful of their culture. So if they were coming to Ghana or Nigeria, wherever, we would have wanted them to respect our culture. So if you are going to an Islamic country, just look at the rules. They don't like alcohol. You can't take some drugs or certain things there. Just respect it. And I think we have a very smooth COP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn, and thank you, Esther. Wow, it's been a very insightful first edition of the Road to COP28 webinar series. We've had a very good start, and then already I'm looking forward to the sessions that are going to come next month and the month after, until we get to the final edition in November. Once again, we are grateful to our partners, British High Commission, BBC Africa, Climate Reality, for giving us your support to once again bring this Road to COP28 webinar series where young people are educated about the COP processes, and also giving you opportunities to share what they're also doing when it comes to the fight against climate change. We've had very wonderful submissions. Earlier, we had a conversation with lawyer Yaw Osafo, who is the country's lead negotiator on Global Stocktake, and also he also leads the DSC for the African Group of Negotiators, where some of us also engaged him with our questions on what's the Global Stocktake process is like, and whether or not we should expect a positive outcome after COP28 to ensure that parties really are inspired or encouraged to be able to strengthen their ambitions after COP28 when they have to review and submit another national determined contributions and give us a very mind-blowing insights. Then we engaged further the young negotiators from Ghana, Ms. Evelyn Addor and Esther Nyamekye, who also shared with us the experiences being part of the UNFCCC negotiation processes and what we should expect going forward to COP28. And also soon, we've come to the end of the first edition of the Road to COP28 webinar series. And like I mentioned earlier, we are looking forward to many more of such engaging in this conversation. Next month, we are going to talk about the just transition or energy transition and what is Africa's position. There was a question by Richard Marty on how we can use the narrative that we have abundance, renewable energy potential, how do we tap into it, even in the midst of the conversation around transitioning from dirty or unclean water to clean water. So we are going to have more, we are going to have experts who are going to dialogue further on that conversation next month. So watch out for us on all our social media handles, SYND Ghana, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and also on LinkedIn. Follow us, and we are going to be live, and then when it's getting closer to the time, we will inform you so that you find the link wherever you are and you join us for another wonderful conversation. My name is Patience Ejokum, and I'm happy I moderated this session today. And so until the next time we meet somewhere next month, it's bye for now. Thank you so much once again, Evelyn, and thank you very much, Esther. We're also very grateful to lawyer Yaw Osafo for spending time with us, even though he's very busy and he had equally important engagements. So to end, I'll read some thank you remarks from the participants in the chat box. So this is from Patty. She said, thank you very much for sharing the information. She's grateful. Thank you, Evelyn, for the great submission. Thank you, Esther, as well. Smith is also thank you very much for the great submission you gave him and the answer you gave to his question. Thank you for a fruitful session. This is from Bala Al-Pasi. All right, so bye-bye for now. Continue to follow SYU on all our social media handles. We have more interesting activities and programs for you coming up. And then don't forget, anytime you see the notification and to register for the Roots COP28 webinar series, click on the button and register right away, because you are sure you are going to get another informative discussion about COP28. Bye. See you next month.